If you ever find yourself in Sleepy Hollow, New York, late at night, you might just have the misfortune of meeting a legend. At the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery dwells the infamous Headless Horseman. At night, he forever wanders in search of his head, and at dawn, he tethers his hellish steed to a nearby grave as he waits for the sun to set to continue his search. Happy Halloween and welcome to Below the Forest Floor. My name is Nancy and I'm here with my husband/co-host Ryan.
Hello.
Today we are going to be discussing one of the most infamous Halloween classics, the Dullahan, or as you might know him, the Headless Horseman.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Headless Horseman story in general. I love Sleepy Hollow. All the games that have the Headless Horseman as like, a Halloween boss and stuff like that. And then when I was listening to one of the Graveyard Tales episodes where they talked about the Fae, like in general, they did mention the Dullahan, the Headless Horseman, is a Fae, which is just the classification of European folklore spirits. They're all considered Fae apparently.
Yep.
So I really I was like, this would be a perfect Halloween episode for you.
Yeah, so this is actually suggested by Ryan, and I thought it was a great idea.
Oh, thank you.
The Dullahan is a species of Fae, as Ryan told you all about, but it's also a Celtic god that goes by the name From Croc. Yet some say he's the Undertaker himself. Then again, another tale imagines him as an Irish adventurer that traveled Texas after the war with Mexico.
Which I could see that being a thing too. And I don't know if because I haven't seen her script. She's going to be explaining it to me of what she found as well as you guys. And I'm going to be cutting in and out with things that I know of for it and the things that I have learned as well. And I don't know if you get into it, but there is a lot of different interpretations of what the Dullahan can show up as a spirit. It can be male, it can be female. There isn't much of a difference between the two. They're both in like black armor, their head somewhere on their body. Sometimes it's a headless horse, sometimes it's a normal horse.
I didn't know about the armor part. Like everything else I kind of found out, but I forgot to talk about the headless horse part. But I did not know about them wearing armor. I thought they were just dressed in old-timey clothes. But I guess
a lot of the depictions as pictures are of like, a lot of times it is in a type of like gothic looking black armor. Sometimes it's like full leather, sometimes it's actual like iron armor. But yeah, so that's one of the things I just want to quickly say is like, I can see it happening with the whole traveling through Texas bit, just because there are so many different variations that come in and out of existence that it kind of just seems like it's
everywhere.
Yeah, the whole Celtic god part is like the god putting his image in a bunch of different places for different reasons,
which is what happens a lot with religion, theology, urban legends, lore, etc.
And it's kind of the Irish Grim Reaper is what you can consider it. And it shares some similarities with the Banshee, where
Really?
it's an omen. If you see it, it's kind of a warning. But the problem is that with the Banshee is a warning that if you see a Banshee, someone personally is about to die. The Dullahan, though, if you see it, is in anywhere in your research, did you see what happens to someone if they see a Dullahan?
Yes, and it was hilarious. I'm
gonna say that I'm not gonna get into it right now because I want to go through that part.
God.
Then
You're gonna love when I bring it up. It's hilarious.
So I'll let you keep going then.
Okay, so although it sounds like the story of the Dullahan has taken on a few lives of its own, which happens, I would like to start at the beginning, or as far back as I could find. Back in ancient Ireland before the rise of Christianity, there was a polytheistic religion called Celtic paganism. If you don't know what polytheistic means, it means many gods are worshipped. Peoples worship multiple gods, and some have even broken off into smaller cult-like worshippers that worshipped singular gods heavily and did anything to please them. One of these gods was named Crom Cruk. This god was a sacrificial fertility god and was nicknamed the Crooked One. He was short, had the stature of a frog, as he, is depicted as constantly being hunched over, carrying grains upon his back. And he has an extremely large face that takes up like half of his entire being. He also has spiraled eyes, is very dark, and is covered with etchings all over his entire body. Did you see anything like that with your research?
I've heard bits and pieces about just the sacrificial fertility god of pagan the ancient ways of paganism and stuff when it comes to the different gods that were worshipped at different times. His name did crop up a lot, but this was things that like I had known about like, maybe 10 years or so or more. So no, some of this is new to me too.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I'm not gonna lie, it kind of creeped me out when I saw it. Each year, an ox or human were to be they were decapitated. I'm sorry, like for anybody who is squeamish, their heads were cut off on the first day of Samhain.
Thank you for the love of God. Thank you for finding out the pronunciation of that, because that is a number one thing. Everyone sees Samhain and they're all like, and when everyone gets them out, there's songs that talk about the son of Sam and everything. It's like, it's not Sam, it's Sa at that point. If you're not going to say the whole thing, then it is Sa, it's Samhain, not Samhain.
I tried really hard.
Because Gallic dialect is so difficult to speak also. And it's kind of funny because in Ireland, even now, Ireland and Scotland, both, their native language, if the further north you go, there's a joke about like the further north you go, the less and less you can understand them because the accent is so harsh in some parts that it's like they can be speaking English to you and you will not know because syllables, what is that?
To interject really quick, just so y'all know, Ryan is part Irish, so you don't think he's just talking smack.
No, it's definitely, it's something that I've definitely looked a lot into, and like in hearing the jokes and stuff like that, I do see it a lot, and I hear it a lot too. But I want to interject about the whole Samhain thing, just because I think it's so funny.
I wanted to make sure I pronounced it correctly. I went and looked up so many videos on actual Irish people pronouncing it. That's how I came across this YouTuber. I really should have written it down, like his name, because he was really cool. He was talking about all of this really cool stuff on top of all the other things.
She also knows some of my pet peeves when it comes to
some
other parts of Irish mythology and stuff like that with some of them. And and I sent you that one thing like a couple of weeks ago about Cersei when she went through the different pronunciations of different words. That's just
I wanted to get it right.
It's interesting, and I like the dedication to that fact.
Thank you.
When it comes to your research, you always do that so much.
I try because I am Hispanic and I don't.
And you don't like when people do that about,
my name,
Spanish words and things like that also. So yeah, you're right there.
Yeah, I get it. So I really do try. And if I do mess up, I apologize, and please feel free to let us know nicely if you can.
Oh, of course.
But yeah.
And that's the thing. A lot of times it is more on the nicer side of things where it's like, oh, well, like, because I know personally from experience talking to some people about things like that, especially where it's like you're reading it the way that you see it. Yeah. So
which honestly, blame the English language and hooked on phonics.
Yeah, it's like it's an honest mistake, and it's okay.
Yeah. So that's something I thought was really interesting, was that they would cut off people or oxes' heads to please this god,
because they had thought the spirit was attached to the head.
And I didn't know that part.
So they wanted to, when it comes to sacrificing things, you want the spirit to go to this god, so you cut off the head for that. And it goes the same way with in the ancient Celtic wars and stuff like that, where there's, whether it be tribes fighting amongst each other, same with Scotland and the Scottish fight. I can't remember the guy's name now, but the story that was bastardized with the Braveheart movie. But they would decapitate their enemies' leaders because they saw it as a humiliation and an embarrassment to lose that connection, sort of thing, like just the decapitation was everywhere.
Ooh. Yeah, so it was something that was practiced very widely for the people who worship this god, and in return for this sacrifice, the Celts would be provided with a bountiful harvest and large cattle. For those of you who don't celebrate Samhain, it's a holiday that begins on the evening of October 31st. Sorry, there was a pause because I thought Rian was gonna be like, "Yeah, that's cool," and then he didn't say anything, but I got excited. I know he probably you knew this, didn't you?
I did know that.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I was excited.
Yeah, it is Halloween. It's the kind of the start of it. And it starts on the evening of October 31st, but it's primarily November 1st when
until the evening of November 1st. That's what I read.
Well, yeah, November 1st is also when Samhain starts, also the actual the celebrations and stuff, because then it goes on from that point on to, I believe the next one after that is Yule, which is
the
pagan
Christmassy time.
Yep, that is for Christmas.
But yeah, from what I saw in my research, it said it starts the evening of October 31st to the evening of November 1st.
Yep, and then it is the actual that holiday season, quote unquote, moving forward.
Spooky stuff. But
yeah,
just to make things clear, this creature, the one that we're talking about, the crooked one, he is not the origin story of Halloween. So don't be telling no one that we said that, because we didn't. That'll be an episode for another day, probably.
Yeah, Halloween's just what you could consider it. Colonizers called it.
Yeah, that's basically colonizers colonized.
There's a lot of stuff pulled in any of the holidays that we have now. We're almost all pulled from paganism, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah,
because of reasons.
The more you know.
I don't know if I should get into that.
We'll do that on another day.
Your podcast, so
I really don't care, honestly. I almost called out a guy here who was 35 years old and married a 15-year-old girl because he was a writer of one of the Headless Horseman stories, but it's not Washington Irving. It was another one.
Oh, and I think I know which one you're talking about. I can't remember the name, though.
You'll hear it later. Anyways, okay. I was about to say, we call him out on this podcast, and then I stopped myself. So you know what? Anyways, depending on the lore that you choose to believe, this god, like most other ancient gods, was eventually replaced and reincarnated into the Dullahan after being driven away with the rise of St. Patrick, literally. St. Patty. In the story of St. Patrick, he points his staff at the stone idol of Crom and causes it to crumble with his...
to crumble?
That's why I married him. With his, I guess, power of religion that wasn't this. This caused people to rename Crom Croc to Crom Dub. I don't know how to pronounce that one. I couldn't find it.
It's basically like a dub,
okay.
But it's kind of got a little bit of a breathy end to it on the B.
All right. And instead of sacrificing people/animals to him, because now St. Patrick had brought Christianity to Ireland and that was frowned upon.
And then they decided to pull all the pagan things that they liked, and then just kind of say that it was theirs.
Yeah. So instead of doing that, they offer bountiful harvests.
There are multiple gods in paganism that deals with bountiful harvests as well.
And Crom Croc was also no longer a god at this point. He was just a myth and was redubbed a fae, like Ryan mentioned earlier.
Yes.
The Dullahan was said to be the most evil version of the god Crom Croc, as he was so angry that St. Patrick cast him out, taking the souls of would-be sacrifices with him. He made himself into a creature that would be able to obtain souls on his own.
Which is kind of why it is considered the Irish Reaper or the Celtic Reaper.
Mm-hmm. Crom Croc decided to disguise himself as a mortal-looking man with no head who would ride a pitch-black horse to quickly chase down his victims. Once he would catch up to these victims, he would swiftly knock off their heads. Other versions of the story claim that Crom Croc created an army of fae-like creatures he dubbed Dullahan to retrieve sacrifices for him.
Yep.
These Dullahan can be either male or female and are all headless, as Ryan mentioned earlier. They carry their heads with them underneath their arms and ride around on horses, seeking those who are about to die to escort them to the underworld.
And another part of that is that, yes, they every one of the Dullahan, whether it be him himself or all the ones that he has created, yes, they are all headless. Their heads are almost always somewhere near them. Sometimes they have them hanging on their belt, like by their hair. Sometimes they hold them under their arm, like you had said. Sometimes they actually just are holding them in their other hand.
And the reason for that, I'll get into in a little bit because it's really interesting.
The eyes?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay. So although Crom was said to be a fertility god, new lore suggests he now takes on the role of Undertaker. I wonder if that's because of the traumatic way he was removed from the earth.
Could be.
It's even said that he sometimes utilizes a horse and buggy to help the souls of those who have passed cross over.
I love whatever I've seen of what they call it, like a lot of, like sometimes it's the death wagon, the
Death wagon.
The depictions of it is amazing. I love that version of it so much.
Some lore says he isn't malicious, but he's still kind of scary to me though, because he shows up with a whip made from a human spine and thigh bones adorning the carriage he's driving.
And not just adorning. The wheels, the spokes of the wheels are made of thigh bones.
That was the one that I couldn't remember. It's just so creepy.
I love it. I love it so much.
Two different kinds of people.
Which I'm surprised you don't more often because of your infatuation with just bones in general as well. It's like, I figured that you would have loved that thing.
I'm not saying I don't love it. I'm just saying it's creepy. Like, I would not like to see that in person coming towards me because then I would know what it's for.
Oh, hell no. Yeah. You're not allowed to see the Dullahan.
We'll get to that in a bit because it's hilarious. You can't even really run from him or them, besides obviously being on a horse, which they are. The severed head they carry can see extreme distances, even on the darkest nights, and spot any home of those close to passing away. He's like a really scary Santa, and his present is death.
And did you read anything about how you can't exactly hide from him either?
I don't remember. Let me get through this part and then we shall discuss it.
I'm going to look ahead and see if you haven't.
Not only that, you know how you're not supposed to look at Santa and be awake when he leaves you presents? Well, the Dullahan has a quirky little thing like that too. If you stay up late and watch him do his thing from your window, he'll throw a basin of blood into your face to blind you. And that's why you should mind your own business.
And some things is the basin of blood. Some of them is he'll use the whip.
Oh, shoot.
And slash across your eyes and will make you permanently blind. All of this stuff that happens to you, it will make you permanently blind. Not just like, oh, you wipe it out of your eyes and you're okay. No, you are no longer allowed to see.
That's so funny.
blocks your sight
You are
from you.
no longer allowed to see, and that's why you should mind your business.
Also, if you are running from this thing and you think, oh, I'm going to duck into a house and lock the door, that will not work, because it's been said that when the Dullahan is chasing someone, windows, doors, locks, everything like that fly open and stay open and are not able to
The
close.
goof.
Doors are not able to be closed if he's around.
Ooh. Talk about invasion of privacy.
So running away from this creature is a no-go.
Don't look at him. Don't run from him.
And that's the thing, is it's like the Banshee.
Mhm.
The Banshee is now that you've gotten through the part with the whole blinding
Mhm.
thing, the Banshee is a warning, but the Dullahan, if you see it, you were kind of meant to see it though.
Mhm.
It's your soul is the one that is going.
Yeah.
He is I can't remember if it's Greek or Roman that has Chiron, the boatman that ferries people into the underworld. He is basically the Celtic version of Charon. That's why the depictions of the wagon are so important, is because the wagon is the stagecoach is to gather souls and take them to where they need to go.
Like a really interesting looking bus.
Yeah, kind of.
To forever.
You know, like Totoro has the big cat
Oh
bus,
no.
and
This has the thigh carriage.
the thigh carriage, the thick carriage.
I'm not gonna edit the echoes out of this because I laughed way too hard there. But
God.
that was so funny. It's got 4 seats for each of the wheels.
Oh God. Yeah.
So of course this story of a man with no head took off and was retold around the world countless times. Eventually,
Not gonna lie, that the head took off. That made me start to chuckle inside, and I was still muted from that.
Thank you. I'm glad, because I didn't notice I did that till just now when you said that. I'm laughing at it myself. And was retold around the world countless times, eventually making its way to the US, where, as usual, we ruined it.
Kinda.
No, we took it and we made it our own, where 2 iterations of this tale were created. One, a timeless classic written by the Washington Irving, which, by the way, that was the name of my middle school.
Yeah.
And the other, not so popular version written by Thomas Maine Reed. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yep.
We'll talk about this one first, the one by Thomas, because I'm honestly not a fan of this person in general. That's the guy I told you was...
He was kind of a man of his time.
That was the man who was 35 and married his publicist's 15-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
Ew. Sorry, I had to. It was gross. We'll talk about this one first, like I was saying. Anyways, so Thomas was an Irish reporter and author that traveled from New York to Texas to take part in the war with Mexico.
Oh, now I see where the sometimes depicted as a soldier of Texas wandering after the Mexican War.
Yeah. He sounds pretty interesting, right? Well, he even wrote some books based off of Texas regions that he had visited, and one of his biggest fans was a young Theodore Roosevelt.
Come on, anybody from Texas would be a big fan of Theodore Roosevelt.
No, Theodore Roosevelt was a fan of him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I read it the wrong way.
Yeah,
then.
Theodore Roosevelt was a little kid and would read this man's books.
Oh, okay.
And he became like a super fan of his. One of the pieces that he wrote was a story called The Headless Horseman in 1865. So this came out after The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which we're going to talk about after this. Fun fact, Thomas was a drinking buddy of Edgar Allan Poe's, and Mr. Poe had this to say about Thomas. He is a colossal but most picturesque liar. So,
he's always so good with his words.
Oh my God, he is. It's so good. That was like a quote directly from Edgar Allan Poe about Thomas. So the reason he wrote this story, that Thomas wrote this story, was because while he was down in Texas and Mexico, he met up with a man named Creed Taylor, who wrote a story called El Muerto, where Creed recounts the tale of having captured the leader of a horse thief gang He killed the leader, tied the headless body to a horse, and sent it off towards the gang's whereabouts to send a message.
I can attest to that as well, because there's been documents of things like that happening a lot of places where it's like they'll send the messenger on the horse that the messenger came in, because the horse knows to get back home, you know, when it's done. So like it doesn't necessarily know that the person on its back is dead or anything like that, but a lot of times they would cut the head, put it in a sack. Sometimes they wouldn't send the body, sometimes they would. But like I can definitely see where the headless horseman would kind of come up from something like this, because like the horse with this headless person tied to the horse just going back there, everyone just looking at us like, what the hell is this?
Yep. And this inspired Thomas greatly, apparently, and he ended up writing the Headless Horseman story, which is a story that revolves around a young man seeing the ghost of his brother who is brutally murdered. Now for Mr. Irving's version, fun fact about
that everybody knows.
Yeah, fun fact about Mr. Irving is that he actually covered Aaron Burr's treason trial.
Wow, this comes full circle, don't it?
Oh my God,
there's a lot of big names in this.
You know it. This is I didn't even tell you about how Washington Irving had so many fans, and from what I read, I didn't double check this one like I usually research it, but from what I heard, let me check really quick. I hate being wrong. That's why I researched the heck out of this.
And that's one of the things. Like, there's so much information about that, which is strange because when it comes to the Dullahan, I'll just take over for a little bit while you're looking.
I already looked it up.
Okay, because like with the Dullahan in general, speaking of the creature itself, there's not a whole lot on it, but the story of like the stories that led to it or like came from it, there's a lot on.
Yeah, which is like most urban legends, stories, lore, etc., gods. So I double checked it to be sure that the timeline would match, and yes, it does, because I saw it earlier. Mary Shelley was even a fan of Washington Irving's stories.
I can kind of see where she had gotten the Frankenstein inspiration.
Spooky and Spose.
Yeah, kind of. I can see it.
And Sleepy Hollow, which was written by Mr. Washington Irving, was published in 1820. So that came out like years before that other story we were just talking about. This tale follows a man named Ichabod Crane, a local school teacher. Spoiler alert, if you don't want to know how the book ends, skip ahead. If you don't care, because this book is extremely old and was written in 1820.
In the 20s.
The 1820s
even, yes.
Yeah, no, then just keep listening. Ichabod Crane falls in love with a woman named Katrina, and she ends up using Ichabod to make the antagonist of the story, Abraham Brom Bones Van Brunt, jealous. What a name. Brom Bones is the local town hero, also in love with Katrina, and despises Ichabod for his crush on her.
It's a triangle.
Yeah. Well, more like a line, and one little guy's just being pushed around by both people.
Yeah, kind of.
So during this whole, I guess, the triangle Ryan was talking about, they're trying to win the hand of Katrina, and
oh, there must be two different versions of this.
Really?
Because the version of the story that I had seen stuff being talked about also is that like the movie was what I don't remember the actual.
This is from the book.
Well, no, I mean, the book that I remember hearing about, and especially with doing a little bit of research also, there was a version that Ichabod wasn't scared out of town. He was killed. That Brom guy taunted the Headless Horseman into killing Ichabod. And with Ichabod dead, he was able to marry Katrina.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
Thank you, Rue. Ignore the dogs in the background.
I'm not going to take this out.
We're just got the muscle to it.
We're recording this the night before Halloween. It's 9:25. I'm not going to edit this. Good luck, everyone. But the thing is, so Katrina knew that Brom liked her and used Ichabod to make him jealous. And while Ichabod and Brom were like trying to win her hand, air quotes, he was playing pranks on Ichabod to like freak him out, get him to go away. And one of the pranks that he pulled was him dressing up as the Headless Horseman to scare Ichabod. And it worked. He scared Ichabod so badly one night that, like after a dance and everything, that Ichabod fled the town, never to be heard from again. In the original story, this is where I got this information from, the story never actually says it was Brom, but it was heavily implied at the end of the book that it is indeed him. Also, he ends up marrying Katrina, so like, he got the girl anyways. But let's discuss the lore of the Headless Horseman in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow a bit. In the town of Sleepy Hollow, the story of the Headless Horseman is that he was once a German soldier who fought in the American Revolutionary War, which actually German soldiers did fight in the American Revolutionary War. They were called Hessians from what I saw.
Yep.
The soldier was decapitated by a cannonball and now wanders around with his head under his arm riding his horse.
That is a rough way to go.
It is. He is said to be looking for a victim to behead because he's upset. You know, he lost his flippin' head. It's extremely similar to the stories of the Dullahan from Irish Celtic lore, which to me means that Mr. Irving must have really enjoyed his fair shares of spooky tales and old gods.
Oh, of course, who doesn't?
I also love the fact that Mr. Irving put a story within a story, and the story that is in that story is based on actual lore. It's freaking awesome. Mind blown. Especially the fact that this story was published in 1820, which means Washington Irving would have gotten his hands on some pretty old texts that included stories of the Dullahan, or heard the stories throughout his life about it. Some scholars suggest he was inspired to write it after a trip abroad in Europe where the Dullahan originates from.
Yep.
Any final thoughts before we close off this episode, Rian?
I'm looking really quickly to see when... Okay, so about 100 years prior to this book being made... Well, 100 years is when it started. I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, so the old text that he must have grabbed a hold of to be able to... Or, like, hearing about the stories of the Dullahan and all that stuff. If he didn't have ancestors that were from Scotland or Ireland, which I haven't looked into Washington Irving, so I don't know if he is, but the peak period of the Scottish-Irish immigration to America happened from 1718 to 1774, where over 250,000 people immigrated in total, which were Pilgrims, Puritans, Quakers, and everyone before that came before them. So you can imagine throughout that entire spot, what the look on your face says you found something.
I did. While you were talking about that, I looked up Washington Irving's ethnicity. His father is Scottish.
Okay, so his father or his grandfather would have probably immigrated during that point where the Scottish and Irish immigration was happening. So between 1718, which was 100 years before the book was made, to 1774, which was what? That's like 45 years? Yeah, about 45 years, 44. So, yeah, it could have been his dad or his grandfather would have had stories of this. So he probably heard a lot about it growing up.
And then imagine going to Europe, possibly to visit family, maybe, possibly business. Hearing stories that might have been similar.
Yeah, exactly. Hearing all the different versions of it, especially because around the time of the St. Patrick thing, paganism and a lot of Celts after the Christianity bit that happened with it, a lot of them still stayed true to pagan roots also, and especially like the ones that weren't converted were killed, but the people that kind of lived on from there, they kind of like hid it, and that was kind of where some of the underground kind of stuff from that went, the hidden pagans and things. But like it never truly died off, and a lot of the cultures and traditions and things like that, they did continue on. So all of that stuff continuing on, would have made it. Well, it definitely made it over here, but it probably made it over here in the way around the time that he was a kid.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like all of this history, lore, urban legends. That's, I think, why I love this podcast so much, because I'm a big history buff. I love learning everything about history. You can ask Ryan.
And you love spooky things
do.
too, and this is a perfect mix of both of those.
Like, you can ask Ryan. I watch documentaries like it's drama TV shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it honestly is. Have you guys heard of the things Henry VIII did? My God.
I think that even though it's not a spooky tale, you should go through that on a podcast episode.
Well,
it's spooky enough.
Well, because you can see Anne Boleyn's ghost walking through the halls still.
You know what? There you go. You'll have an episode on that, because that will lead directly into describing all of the stuff that he did.
Oh my God, it's insane. He was actually, according to history text, he was hot at some point. Like
at some point before he became
a monster of a man who literally his legs were being destroyed from his weight,
figuratively and literally.
Yes. Anyways, back to this. Oh dang, now I gotta write an episode about Henry VIII. Anyways, so anything else you would like to talk about before we hop off?
No, but I loved this one.
Oh, I'm so glad.
This is probably one of my favorite ones, because I knew a little bit about this stuff before looking a little bit more into it, and I'm sure that some of the stuff that I'm going off of memory for was probably, some of it was probably off by a bit, some of it was probably wrong, so I am sorry if I got anything wrong on my part. I'm just going off from what the top of my head was for the last like 15 to 20 years of just really wanting to know more about, Irish and Scottish culture in general.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you wanted me to be a part of research from something of your culture.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that. So whether the Dullahan or Dullahans are real or not, they are welcome down here with us below the forest floor. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Stay tuned for more in the near future. We would like to also thank our forest deity patron, Lotus Vincent, for your continued support of the podcast. Thank you, Lotus.
Thank you. And I do want to try to work on merch stuff.
Which we do have some merch. It is linked somewhere.
I want to go through and get like 2 to 3 ones for each different topic episode you've made.
Ooh.
Just have a little bit of like, let's see what people's favorites could be.
All right. Well, if you guys have any suggestions of merch from stories that were your favorite, let us know in the comments anywhere you can find. We're all over social media. Just tag us somewhere at Below the Forest Floor.
Yeah.
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Facebook would probably be the best bet.
Yeah. So thank you again, Lotus. And if you would like to have your name featured at the end of an episode of Below the Forest Floor, make sure you become a forest nymph or forest deity member on our Patreon today.
And you could just throw $1 in there and you got it.
That's a forest nymph. You guys would be super appreciated, and you get exclusive content basically, because I post whole scripts there that we have read on the podcast. You get to see what we didn't say.
Yeah, I did put a little bit more thought into recording 2 things, recording the edited and an unedited version of it, just so people could see like the back and forth that we have.
Yeah.
And the different things, like the dogs barking when we normally edit that out.
Yeah, but this time you guys got the special version because they wanted to be a part of it. And we also put episodes on there with no ads whatsoever. So it's up to you guys. If you want to go check it out for us, we would be very appreciative. And it is Below the Forest Floor on Patreon. Thank you so much, everybody. We hope you have a happy and safe Halloween.
And we will see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.